To the staff at Chicago's Mercy General Hospital, Aurora Jenkins was a mistake. A liability wrapped in scrubs 3 sizes too big, shuffling through the ER like a ghost no one wanted to acknowledge. For 3 weeks, they'd watched her flinch at loud noises, avoid eye contact with doctors, and move through her shifts with a kind of hesitation that made seasoned nurses shake their heads in disgust. Dr. Marcus Sterling had placed a $500 bet in the staff lounge that she wouldn't last until Christmas. "Look at her," he'd said, gesturing dismissively as Aurora refilled an 4 bag with trembling hands. "She jumps when a door closes. Can you imagine her in a real crisis?" What none of them knew, what Aurora had spent 3 years trying to forget, was that those same trembling hands had once held the lives of Army Rangers together in the streets of Kandahar. That the shuffle in her walk wasn't weakness, but a carefully constructed shield. And that the 28-year-old woman they dismissed as fragile had a code name whispered with reverence in the shadowed corners of forward operating bases across 3 continents. They called her Reaper. Not because she took lives, but because she refused to let death take anyone on her watch. The mockery would end on a freezing Tuesday night in December, when a 7-foot giant covered in someone else's blood would crash through the ER doors, and Aurora Jenkins would show them exactly what 8 seconds of combat-trained precision looked like. The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's ER hummed with their usual 2 in the morning buzz, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that made exhaustion look like a medical condition. Aurora Jenkins stood at the nurse's station, her small frame hunched over a medication cart, double-checking dosages with an intensity that seemed excessive to everyone watching. Which was exactly the point. Is she seriously counting those pills again? Jessica Martinez, the head night nurse, didn't bother lowering her voice. 20 years in emergency medicine had stripped away any pretense of politeness during graveyard shifts. "That's the 3rd time. We're gonna be here until sunrise." Aurora's hands trembled slightly as she marked her clipboard. She didn't look up. Didn't defend herself. Just made a small apologetic sound that might have been words and continued her count. "She does realize we have actual patients, right?" This from Brad Chun, one of the ER residents working a double shift. He leaned against the desk, scrolling through his phone with one hand while gesturing vaguely in Aurora's direction with the other. Like people who might need those medications before the heat death of the universe. Quiet laughter rippled through the station. Aurora's shoulders curved inward another fraction of an inch. The ER was relatively calm for a Tuesday night, 2 patients sleeping off alcohol poisoning in curtained bays, 1 elderly man with chest pain awaiting transport to cardiology, and a teenager with a sprained ankle scrolling through TikTok with his sound on. The kind of night where boredom bred cruelty, and the weakest member of the pack made an easy target. 3 weeks. Dr. Marcus Sterling's voice cut through the ambient noise like a scalpel. He strode into the nurse's station with a kind of confidence that comes from never being contradicted, his white coat crisp despite the late hour, his Harvard Medical School ring catching the light as he reached for a tablet. "She's been here 3 weeks, and I still haven't seen her do anything faster than a geriatric sloth." At 36, Sterling was Mercy General's youngest chief of emergency medicine, a fact he mentioned frequently enough that the staff had started a drinking game around it. Tall, conventionally handsome in that generic catalog model way, he wore his ambition like cologne, obvious and slightly overwhelming. "Maybe she's thorough." This half-hearted defense came from Amy Rodriguez, a newer nurse who hadn't yet learned that defending Aurora was a losing proposition. Sterling's laugh was sharp. "Thorough? She took 20 minutes to start and 4 yesterday. On a normal adult vein. My grandmother could have done it faster, and she's been dead for 5 years." More laughter. Aurora's clipboard shook slightly in her hands. "I'm serious," Sterling continued, warming to his audience. "Look at her. She weighs what, 100 pounds soaking wet? Flinches when someone raises their voice. Yesterday I saw her nearly drop a tray because a bed alarm went off." He shook his head with exaggerated disbelief. "I genuinely don't understand how she made it through nursing school. Probably a diversity hire or something." Aurora finally looked up. Her eyes met Sterling's for exactly half a second before skittering away. "I'm sorry, doctor. I'll work faster." Her voice came out barely above a whisper, raspy and uncertain. The voice of someone who had learned that speaking only invited more attention, more mockery. "See." Sterling gestured at her like she was evidence in a trial. "Can't even maintain eye contact. How is she supposed to handle a real trauma? How is she supposed to deal with a combative patient? Hell, how is she supposed to function in any high-pressure situation? Maybe we should give her easier assignments, Jessica suggested, not unkindly. Wound care, discharge instructions, that kind of thing. Keep her away from anything serious. That's not fair to the rest of you, Sterling said, tapping something into his tablet. You'll end up covering her work anyway. He paused, seemed to consider something. Tell you what. I'll give her until New Year's. If she can't pull it together by then, I'm recommending her for termination. We can't afford deadweight in the ER. Aurora's fingers tightened on her clipboard, knuckles going white. But she said nothing. Just nodded once, a small jerky movement, and went back to her medication count. What none of them saw, what 3 years of practiced invisibility had taught her to hide, was the way her eyes tracked the room's exits. The way her weight shifted almost imperceptibly onto the balls of her feet. The way her breathing stayed measured and controlled despite the humiliation burning through her chest. In another life, in another uniform, Aurora had stood in rooms far more hostile than this. Had faced down threats that made Dr. Sterling's petty cruelty look like a child's tantrum. But that life was supposed to be over. Buried. Forgotten. The dog tags that hung against her sternum under her scrubs were a constant cold reminder that some things could never be truly forgotten. They read: Jenkins, Aurora M. Sergeant, U.S. Army. 75th Ranger Regiment. Cultural Support Team. But here, in this fluorescent-lit purgatory, she was just the weak new nurse. The one who couldn't handle the pressure. The one who would probably get someone killed. If only they knew. Aurora. Jessica's voice had shifted to that patient but exhausted tone people use with children and incompetent employees. Can you please take the medication cart to Bay 7? Mr. Patterson needs his antibiotics. Yes, ma'am. Aurora's voice stayed soft, submissive. She began pushing the cart toward Bay 7, her movements deliberate and cautious. And try not to take all night about it, Brad called after her. Some of us want to go home before Christmas. Aurora didn't respond. Just kept moving, her oversized scrubs making her look even smaller than her 5 feet 4 inches frame, her light brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that suggested she'd given up trying to look professional weeks ago. What they saw, a weak, frightened woman who had no business working in emergency medicine. What they missed, the way her eyes cataloged everything, every patient position, every equipment location, every potential weapon within reach. The way her trembling hands had perfect muscle memory for floor placement, medication administration, and about 24 other tasks that looked accidental but were anything but. The way her shuffle disguised footwork that could drop a combatant in seconds. Aurora had learned the art of invisibility in places where being noticed could get you killed. She perfected it in rooms where the wrong word, the wrong gesture, the wrong look could end not just your life, but the lives of the men depending on you. 3 years ago, she'd walked away from that world. Filed her discharge papers. Cut her hair. Traded combat boots for nursing clogs. Told herself that saving lives in a hospital would be enough. That she could leave Sergeant Aurora Jenkins and everything she'd done in the mountains of Afghanistan buried in the past where it belonged. But the past has a way of finding you. Especially when it's bleeding out and screaming your name. 2:53 a.m. Aurora had just finished administering Mr. Patterson's antibiotics when the first sign of trouble arrived. Not the obvious kind, no alarms, no codes, no trauma alerts. Just a feeling. A prickling sensation at the base of her skull that years of combat had taught her to trust absolutely. Something was wrong. She turned slowly, scanning the ER with eyes that looked unfocused but saw everything. The drunk in Bay 3 was snoring. The teenager with the sprained ankle was still absorbed in his phone. The elderly cardiac patient was. Aurora's eyes narrowed. His monitor was showing irregular heartbeats. Not critical yet, but trending toward dangerous. None of the staff at the nurses' station had noticed. She started to move toward his bay, then stopped. Hesitated. Last time she'd pointed out something ahead of the doctors, Sterling had written her up for overstepping her scope of practice. But the man's rhythm was deteriorating. Aurora's jaw tightened. She moved quickly to the nurses' station, her shuffle abandoned for 3 seconds of purposeful stride before she caught herself and slowed. Dr. Sterling? Her voice came out whisper-soft. I think you should check Bay 4. Mr. Donnelly's monitor. I'll check it when I have time, Sterling interrupted without looking up from his tablet. Unlike some people, I actually know how to prioritize. But his rhythm. Jenkins. Sterling's voice went hard. Are you questioning my clinical judgment? Aurora's throat worked. Every instinct screamed at her to grab the crash cart, to move, to act. But she'd learned the cost of being right in the wrong way. No, doctor. Good. Now why don't you go do what you're actually qualified for? Maybe organize some supply closets. That seems more your speed. Aurora nodded once and turned away, her hands shaking, not with fear this time, but with the physical effort of forcing herself not to act. She made it exactly 4 steps before the monitor in Bay 4 started screaming. The distinctive alarm of ventricular fibrillation cut through the ER's ambient noise like a gunshot. Mr. Donnelly was coding. Code Blue Bay 4. Jessica's shout mobilized the ER staff instantly. Aurora watched as Sterling grabbed the crash cart and ran toward Bay 4, Brad and Jessica flanking him. Watched as they started compressions, as they charged the defibrillator, as they worked with the practiced urgency of a well-trained ER team. They'd save him. Probably. They were good at their jobs, even if Sterling was an ass. But Aurora couldn't shake the thought, if he'd listened to her 30 seconds ago, they wouldn't be coding him at all. She turned back to her medication cart, her shoulders curved in defeat, and tried to ignore the cold weight of the dog tags against her chest. Tried to remember why she'd wanted this quiet life. Why she'd thought she could be normal. The universe, apparently, had other plans. Because at exactly 2:57 a.m., the automatic doors of Mercy General's ER exploded inward, and a giant covered in blood brought Aurora's past crashing into her present with the force of a freight train. The automatic doors didn't just open, they slammed back against their frames with a metallic bang that stopped every conversation mid-sentence. And through them came a nightmare. 6'10", easily 280 pounds of solid muscle, moving with the jerky unpredictability of a wounded animal. Blood soaked the front of his torn t-shirt, not his own, Aurora's combat-trained eyes noted immediately. The pattern was wrong. Spray, not seepage. Someone else's arterial bleed. But it was his eyes that told the real story. Wide. Unfocused. Pupils blown. Lost somewhere between Chicago and a firefight 7,000 miles away. Contact left. The giant's voice boomed through the ER like thunder. He grabbed a plastic waiting room chair and hurled it across the space with terrifying ease. It shattered against the far wall. Insurgents in the wire. Everybody down. The teenager with the sprained ankle screamed and dove under his gurney. The drunken Bay 3 jerked awake with a startled shout. Mr. Donnelly's code team froze mid-compression. Oh my God, Jessica breathed, backing away slowly. He's huge. Security. Sterling's voice cracked slightly. Call security now. The giant, Aurora's eyes caught the faded tattoo on his forearm. 75th Ranger Regiment, same as hers, spun toward Sterling's voice. His hand shot out and grabbed a metal 4-pole, ripping it from its stand with one hand. He held it like a rifle. Taking fire. Medic. We need a medic. His voice broke on the last word, raw with the kind of panic that transcends time and space. He wasn't in Mercy General anymore. He was back in whatever hell had broken him. The ER's 2 security guards, both older men who spent most shifts doing crossword puzzles, appeared in the doorway, took one look at the giant with his improvised weapon, and promptly radioed for police backup. Sir, you need to calm down. This from Brad, trying to sound authoritative and achieving something closer to terrified. This is a hospital. You're safe here. Safe. The giant's laugh was ugly, broken. There's no safe. They're everywhere. Jackson's hit. Jackson's bleeding out. He's talking about himself in third person, Aurora realized with a cold shock of recognition. Complete dissociative break. PTSD flashback, probably triggered by, she noted the blood spatter pattern again, probably just watched someone die. Maybe caused it. Auto accident? Domestic violence intervention? Didn't matter. What mattered was that a 280-pound combat veteran with PTSD was holding a weapon in an ER full of patients, and everyone was about to make it worse. Get back. Sterling pulled Jessica behind him, then called out in his most commanding doctor voice, Sir, I'm Dr. Sterling, and I need you to put down that 4-pole and... The giant swung the metal pole in a wide arc that sent Sterling scrambling backward. The pole connected with the nurse's station counter with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. More screams. Amy Rodriguez fumbled for her phone to call 911. The drunk patient tried to climb out of his bed and fell, pulling his 4 out. Blood started pooling on the floor. It was about to become a massacre. Not intentional, the giant clearly wasn't trying to hurt anyone. But when 280 pounds of muscle and PTSD meets a crowded ER, intentions don't matter. People die. Aurora watched all of this happen in the space of maybe 4 seconds. Watched Sterling's authoritative approach trigger more aggression. Watched the security guard's body language, weight back, hands up, defensive posture that screamed threat to someone stuck in combat mode. Watched everyone doing exactly the wrong thing with exactly the wrong energy. And she made a choice. 3 years of hiding. 3 years of being invisible. 3 years of eating shit from people like Sterling because normal life was supposed to be worth it. All of it burned away in the space of a heartbeat. Aurora Jenkins, the weak nurse, took 2 steps forward and ceased to exist. Sergeant Aurora Jenkins, call sign Reaper, stepped out of the shadows where she'd been hiding. Sergeant Hayes. Her voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Not loud. Not shouting. But carried with it the kind of command authority that makes soldiers' spines straighten on pure instinct. The giant, Hayes, apparently, froze mid-swing. Sergeant Jackson Hayes. Aurora's voice stayed level, firm, absolute. The voice she'd used in Kandahar when 200 pounds of Ranger was bleeding out and needed someone to make their brain focus on staying alive. Corpsman up. Corpsman on deck. Hayes's head swiveled toward her, eyes still wild but searching now. Looking for the source of that voice. That very specific voice using very specific words. Aurora took another step forward. Behind her, she could hear Sterling hissing, "What the hell is she doing? Someone grab her." "Perimeter is secure, Sergeant." Aurora kept her eyes locked on Hayes, her body language open, non-threatening, but absolutely solid. "Mission complete. We are in the green zone. You copy." Hayes's breathing was coming in ragged gasps. The 4-pole wavered. Green zone. Affirmative. No hostiles. No contact. Stand down protocol in effect. Aurora was making half of this up, standard military jargon mixed with educated guesses about what might get through to his fractured brain. "What's your status, Ranger?" Hayes looked down at his blood-covered hands as if seeing them for the first time. There was so much blood." "Copy that. Blood is visible. Not your blood. Confirm, are you injured?" "No, there was a car. Flipped. Woman trapped. So much blood." His voice cracked. "Like Sarah. It was like Sarah all over again. Sarah. Wife, girlfriend, sister, didn't matter. Someone he'd lost. Someone whose blood looked like the blood on his hands now, and his brain had shorted out trying to process the similarity." Aurora took another step closer. She could hear movement behind her, security guards trying to flank. Sterling probably looking for something to sedate Hayes with. All of them about to blow this whole thing sky high. "Hayes." She gentled her voice slightly. "Look at me, soldier." His eyes found hers. Wide. Scared. Lost. "You're not there anymore. You're here." Chicago. Mercy General Hospital. December 17th, 2024. You're stateside. You're home. She let that sink in for 3 seconds. The woman from the car is in Bay 6 right now. Surgeons are working on her. She's alive because you pulled her out. You saved her life. Mission accomplished. Something shifted behind Hayes's eyes. The wild panic receding slightly, reality starting to filter back in. "I saved her." "Affirmative. You're a hero, Sergeant. Now I need you to lower your weapon and let me check you for injuries. Can you do that?" Hayes looked at the 4-pole in his hand as if surprised to find it there. Then slowly, he lowered it. The ER collectively exhaled. Too soon. Because at that exact moment, the elevator dinged, and 2 Chicago PD officers stepped out with their guns drawn. "Police. Drop the weapon." Drop it now. Hayes's head snapped toward the new voices. Toward the guns. Toward the uniforms that looked nothing like Chicago PD in his fractured perception and everything like enemy fighters. No. The word ripped out of Aurora's throat, but it was too late. Hayes's PTSD-shattered brain processed. Armed hostiles, weapons raised, shouting threats. His combat training, the same training that had kept him alive through 3 deployments, overrode everything else. He charged. Not at the cops. Thank God, not at the cops. But away from them, which meant directly toward the nurses' station where Sterling and Jessica stood frozen. 280 pounds of panicked Ranger moving at full speed. Aurora had exactly 2 seconds to make a decision. Later, she'd tell herself she didn't decide anything. That her body just moved on instinct. That 3 years of civilian life hadn't erased 2 years of training alongside the Army's most elite soldiers. But that would be a lie. She chose. Aurora intercepted Hayes 3 feet from the nurses' station. Didn't try to stop him. Stopping 280 pounds of momentum was impossible. Instead, she used it. As Hayes reached for Sterling, not to hurt him, probably just to move him aside, but the cops wouldn't see it that way, Aurora stepped into his path. Her hand shot up and caught his wrist with precision that came from endless training. Not fighting his momentum. Redirecting it. Stand down, Ranger. Her voice carried every ounce of command authority she possessed. Hayes, still operating on combat autopilot, responded to the command in his ear. His body stuttered, his charge breaking. That half-second of hesitation was all Aurora needed. She'd trained in Krav Maga at Fort Benning. Practiced with Rangers who taught her takedown techniques designed for close-quarters combat. Sparred with soldiers twice her size who showed her how to use leverage and momentum and precise strikes to drop threats fast and hard. But she'd never used it outside a training mat. Until now. Aurora's left hand caught Hayes's extended arm. Her right hand went to his elbow, locking the joint. In the same motion, she stepped behind him, her foot hooking behind his knee while her hips drove forward. Physics and leverage took over. Hayes, still off balance from his stuttered charge, went down. Not hard, Aurora controlled the fall, made it as gentle as possible while ensuring he hit the ground face first with her knee in his back. The 4-pole clattered away across the floor. Aurora's hand went to the base of Hayes's skull, applying just enough pressure to the nerve cluster there to remind his body who was in control. Her other arm wrapped around his throat, not choking, not cutting off air, but positioned perfectly to become a vascular restraint if needed. "Sergeant Hayes," she said quietly, her lips close to his ear. "You're safe. I'm a medic. You're at Mercy General Hospital in Chicago. Those are police officers, not hostiles. If you stay calm, nobody gets hurt. If you fight, you'll hurt someone, and then I'll have to put you to sleep. Blink twice if you understand." Hayes blinked twice. "Good. Now I'm going to count to 3, and you're going to take a deep breath and let it out slowly. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Hayes breathed. In. Out. Aurora felt the tension start to drain from his massive frame. Excellent. Again. 1, 2, 3. Another breath. More tension released. The cops had their guns trained on both of them, shouting conflicting orders to let him go. And don't move. And put your hands up. Aurora ignored them completely. Her entire focus stayed on the broken man beneath her. 1 more time, Sergeant. Nice and slow. 1, 2, 3. This time, Hayes's breathing came out as a sob. "I'm sorry," he choked out. "I'm so sorry. I didn't. I wasn't." "I know." Aurora's voice softened. "You were trying to help. You saved that woman's life. You're a good soldier, Hayes. Good soldiers have bad days. This is just a bad day. It's going to be okay." "Ma'am, step away from him." One of the cops, younger, nervous, his gun shaking slightly. Aurora didn't move. "Officer, I'm a nurse at this hospital. This man is a veteran having a PTSD episode. He's not armed. He's not dangerous right now. I have him controlled. If you want to handcuff him, you need to do it slowly, calmly, and you need to tell him exactly what you're doing before you do it." "Understood." The cop looked at his partner, an older guy who'd clearly seen this dance before. "Do what she says," the older cop said quietly. Nice and easy, Hayes. We're going to put handcuffs on you, just temporary, just so nobody gets hurt. Okay. Hayes nodded against the floor. 3 minutes later, Hayes was handcuffed and sitting quietly on the floor, tears streaming down his face, while the older cop called for a crisis intervention team. Aurora stayed next to him, her hand on his shoulder, speaking in low, reassuring tones. The ER was dead silent. Everyone staring at the small, weak, incompetent nurse who had just taken down a 6 feet 10 inches, 280-pound combat veteran in approximately 8 seconds. Finally, Sterling found his voice. What the hell was that? Aurora didn't look up from Hayes. That was a PTSD flashback triggered by what appears to be a traumatic rescue attempt. He needs a psychiatric evaluation and probably admission for observation. Her voice had shifted. Not whisper-soft anymore. Clear. Professional. Authoritative. That's not what I'm asking, Sterling snapped. Where did you learn? Fort Benning, Aurora said simply. Army Combatives Level 3. They teach you to drop bigger threats than Sergeant Hayes here. The silence stretched. You're military? Jessica's voice, barely above a whisper. Aurora finally looked up. Met their stares with steady eyes that held none of the weakness they'd seen for 3 weeks. Not anymore. But. Brad gestured vaguely. You're so. Small? Weak? Scared? Aurora's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. Yeah. Funny how that works. Before anyone could respond, Amy Rodriguez's voice called out from Bay 4, Dr. Sterling. Mr. Donnelly just coded again. Sterling jerked like he'd been slapped. What? I thought we. His rhythm's deteriorating. We need you now. Sterling ran toward Bay 4, his white coat flapping. The rest of the ER staff scattered back to their posts. The crisis intervention team arrived and took custody of Hayes, who went quietly, still crying, still apologizing. Aurora stood slowly, her knees creaking. Adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind the familiar ache of muscle memory and old injuries. Jessica approached her cautiously, like Aurora might suddenly turn into someone else. Which, in a way, she had. That was. Aurora, that was incredible. Where did you really learn that? Aurora looked at the head nurse for a long moment. Considered her options. Considered how much truth to tell. Then she heard Sterling in Bay 4, barking orders, running Mr. Donnelly's code with the same arrogant certainty that had delayed treatment 30 minutes ago. And Aurora knew this wasn't over. Her secret was compromised, but not revealed. And before this night ended, she was going to have to make a choice. Keep hiding. Or step into the light completely. It's a long story, Aurora said quietly. And we have patience. She turned back to her medication cart, but the shuffle was gone. Her spine was straight. Her hands didn't shake. The weak nurse was dead. The only question now was, who would rise from her ashes? 3:47 a.m., 1 hour later. Sergeant Jackson Hayes was stable, sedated, and sleeping in the psychiatric holding room under observation. The woman he'd pulled from the overturned car had made it to surgery and was expected to survive. Mr. Donnelly had been successfully resuscitated and transferred to the cardiac ICU. By all objective measures, the night shift had been a success. Aurora knew better. She'd seen the way Sterling's jaw had clenched when the attending psychiatrist had specifically requested her notes on Hayes's presentation. Seen the way his knuckles had gone white when the trauma surgeon had asked, which nurse did the initial assessment on the MVA victim? They caught signs of internal bleeding our paramedics missed. Pride was a funny thing. It could survive a lot of hits. But being shown up by someone you'd publicly called incompetent? That was a wound that festered. Aurora was organizing supplies in the medication room, actual organizing this time, not the performative recounting, when Sterling appeared in the doorway. He didn't knock. Didn't announce himself. Just stood there, blocking her exit, his face carefully neutral in that way that meant he was furious. Jenkins. My office. Now. Not a request. Aurora set down the medication box she'd been holding and followed him through the ER. She could feel eyes tracking them, Jessica, Brad, Amy, the night shift staff who'd witnessed everything. Their expressions ranged from sympathetic to carefully blank. Nobody met her eyes. Sterling's office was a study in carefully curated success. Medical degrees from Harvard framed on the walls. Awards from the hospital board. A photo of him shaking hands with the mayor. Everything positioned to remind visitors that they were speaking to someone important. He closed the door. Didn't invite her to sit. "I'm going to make this very simple," Sterling said, leaning against his desk with his arms crossed. "What happened tonight cannot happen again." Aurora blinked. "Sir, you physically engaged with a violent patient. You put yourself and others at risk with an unapproved restraint technique. You countermanded police officers. And you did all of it without consulting me or any other physician." The words were so divorced from reality that Aurora actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "I stopped him from hurting someone. Including you, if you'll remember. He was 3 feet from the nurse's station when I intervened. You assaulted a patient. I used a proved CIT technique to de-escalate a PTSD crisis. There's a difference." "Really?" Sterling's eyebrows rose. "And where exactly did a nurse learn military combatives? Where did you learn to de-escalate a 280-pound man having a psychotic break?" There it was. The real question. The one Aurora had been dreading since the moment her training had overridden her 3 years of careful invisibility. She could lie. Should lie. Make up something about a self-defense class at the local YMCA. Claim she'd just gotten lucky with the takedown. But she was so tired of lying. "I told you. Fort Benning. Army Combatives Level 3. Cultural Support Team Training. Attachment with the 75th Ranger Regiment." Aurora's voice stayed level, professional. "I served 2 years in Afghanistan embedded with Special Operations Units. We trained alongside Rangers, learned their hand-to-hand techniques, their crisis intervention protocols. Everything I did tonight was by the book, just not a book you've read." Sterling stared at her. "You're telling me you were in the Army?" "Yes." "And you didn't think to mention this in your employment interview? Didn't think to put it on your resume?" "I put my military service on my resume," Aurora said carefully. "Nursing Corps, combat deployment. It's all there." "You didn't mention Special Operations." "Because I wasn't Special Operations. I was support staff attached to Special Operations. There's a difference. A difference you seem very eager to blur when it's convenient." Sterling pushed off from his desk, started pacing. "You know what I think, Jenkins? I think you lied. I think you've been lying since you walked through our doors. The timid act, the weakness, the incompetence, all of it calculated to make us underestimate you." Aurora's jaw tightened. "That's not. Tonight you made me look like a fool in front of my staff. In front of the police. In front of patients." Sterling's voice went cold. "You undermined my authority, violated hospital protocol, and put this entire department at risk of litigation. Also you could play hero. I saved a man's life. You assaulted a patient. I stopped a veteran in crisis from hurting people." Aurora's voice finally rose to match his. "I used minimal necessary force to protect him, protect the staff, and de-escalate a situation that was about to turn into a bloodbath. And you're mad because I did it without asking your permission first." "I'm mad because you're a liability." Sterling grabbed a folder from his desk, thrust it toward her. "You want to know what I'm looking at right now? A incident report from tonight. Multiple witnesses describing an unauthorized physical restraint. A police report that questions why a nurse was permitted to engage a violent patient. And my own notes documenting 3 weeks of incompetent performance, insubordination, and now this." Aurora's hands stayed at her sides. She didn't take the folder. "You can't fire me for saving someone's life. I can fire you for violating hospital policy. For practicing outside your scope. For creating a liability situation that could cost this hospital millions if Hayes decides to sue." Sterling's smile was sharp as a scalpel. "Your military background doesn't make you special, Jenkins. It makes you dangerous. And I won't have dangerous nurses working in my ER." The words hung in the air between them. Aurora had known this was coming. Had felt it building from the moment Sterling's ego had first taken the hit. But hearing it spelled out so clearly, so coldly, Still felt like a punch to the gut. So that's it? I saved lives tonight. Hayes, that woman from the car, Mr. Donnelly who you misdiagnosing for 30 minutes, and you're firing me. Sterling's expression didn't change. I'm recommending your termination to the hospital board. Given the severity of tonight's incidents, I expect they'll agree. You'll be on administrative leave effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't be serious. I'm absolutely serious. Sterling pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. I've already called security. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings. After that, you're trespassing. Aurora stood there, rage and disbelief warring in her chest. 3 years. 3 years of hiding, of swallowing her pride, of pretending to be weak so she could have a normal life. 3 years of therapy and medication, and slowly learning to be a person again instead of just a weapon. All of it ending because she'd done the right thing. You're making a mistake, she said quietly. No, Sterling replied. Hiring you was the mistake. I'm just correcting it. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. The same 2 who'd frozen when Hayes charged the ER. They looked uncomfortable, but they did their job. Ma'am, the older one said gently, we need you to come with us. Aurora looked at Sterling one last time. Memorized the smug satisfaction on his face. The certainty that he'd won. Then she turned and walked out with her head high. 3:52 a.m., locker room. The security guards waited outside while Aurora cleaned out her locker. There wasn't much. A spare pair of scrubs. Some protein bars. A photo of her unit in Afghanistan. 12 men and women standing in front of a Chinook, all of them smiling like they didn't know half of them would be dead within the year. And at the bottom, wrapped in an old t-shirt, her dog tags. Aurora pulled them out, let them dangle from her fingers. The metal was cold, worn smooth from years of wear. She hadn't worn them since her discharge. Hadn't let herself be that person. Maybe she'd been wrong to try. The locker room door opened. Jessica stood there, her expression conflicted. I'm sorry, the head nurse said quietly. Sterling's. He's not a bad doctor. But his ego. I know. Aurora tucked the dog tags into her pocket. It's fine. It's not fine. You saved that man's life. You saved multiple lives tonight. Jessica hesitated. For what it's worth. I was wrong about you. We all were. Aurora managed a tired smile. Yeah, you were. The board hearing is scheduled for 9 a.m. If you want to fight this. I don't. Aurora closed her locker with a metallic clang. I'm done fighting. 3 years was long enough. What will you do? I don't know. Find another hospital maybe. One where my military background is an asset instead of a liability. She picked up her bag. Or maybe I'll just go back to what I was good at. Which was? Aurora paused at the door. Looked back at Jessica with eyes that held too many ghosts. Keeping Rangers alive when the world was trying to kill them. She walked out without waiting for a response. 4:15 a.m., parking lot. The December air hit like a slap after the climate-controlled hospital. Aurora's breath fogged in the orange glow of the parking lot lights. Her ancient Honda Civic sat in the far corner where she always parked it, away from the nice cars, away from attention. She was halfway to her car when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Aurora almost ignored it. But years of training had taught her that unknown numbers at 4 a.m. usually meant something important. She answered. Jenkins. Silence. Then, Reaper. Aurora's blood turned to ice water. Nobody had called her that in 3 years. Nobody in the civilian world knew that name. It was buried in classified files and the memories of men who'd sworn to take it to their graves. Who is this? It's Havoc. Havoc 6 Actual. A pause. From Kandahar. 2021. You saved my life in a blown-out compound while taking AK fire for 6 hours. You remember. Aurora remembered. Captain Marcus Chin. Ranger Regiment. Triple amputee now, thanks to the IED that should have killed him. She'd kept him alive with battlefield medicine and sheer stubborn will until the evac choppers could reach them. I remember. How did you get this number? Doesn't matter. Listen, I don't have much time. Are you still in Chicago? Mercy General. I was. Just got fired. Why? Fired. Chen's voice sharpened. When? 10 minutes ago. Shit. The word came out harsh. Stay close to that hospital, Reaper. Within 5 minutes if you can. Don't go home. Aurora's training kicked in. When a former operator tells you to stay put, you stay put. What's happening? Can't say on an open line. But there's a bird inbound to your location. ETA 23 minutes. When it lands, get on it. They need you. Who needs me? Chen, I'm a civilian nurse now. I'm not. Reaper. Chen's voice went soft. Serious. It's Titan. Titan's down. And he's asking for you. The world tilted. Titan. Staff Sergeant David Titan Morrison. The biggest, meanest, most protective ranger she'd ever worked with. Her battle buddy for 18 months. The man who'd carried her out of 2 firefights and taught her how to strip an M4 blindfolded. He was asking for her. How bad? Aurora's voice came out steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Bad enough that they're flying him to you instead of you to him. Bad enough that he won't let anyone else touch him. A beat of silence. He trusts you, Reaper. Always has. Aurora looked back at Mercy General. At the hospital that had just spit her out like a bad taste. At the normal life she'd tried so hard to build. Then she looked at her hands. Steady now. Not trembling. Not hiding. Sergeant Aurora Jenkins had never walked away from a fallen ranger. She wasn't about to start now. Copy that, Havoc. I'll be ready. She ended the call and stood in the parking lot, watching the sky, waiting for the sound of rotors. 23 minutes until her past came to collect what she owed. 23 minutes until everyone at Mercy General learned exactly who they'd just fired. 4:38 a.m., the bird lands. Aurora heard it before she saw it. That distinctive WHOP of rotor blades cutting through cold December air. The sound that had meant rescue in Afghanistan. Meant backup. Meant someone was coming to pull you out of hell. She looked up, and there it was. An MH-60M Blackhawk, flying low and fast over the Chicago skyline, matte black with no visible markings. A ghost bird, the kind special operations used when they didn't want to be seen. It descended toward Mercy General's physician parking lot, the one reserved for attending doctors, the one where Sterling's BMW had a dedicated spot, and Aurora allowed herself a grim smile. This was going to be satisfying. The Blackhawk didn't bother with a gentle landing. It dropped hard and fast, skids hitting pavement with a screech of metal. The rotor wash sent cars rocking on their suspension, set off a dozen car alarms, and blew trash across the parking lot in a miniature tornado. Before the skids had fully settled, the side door slammed open. 4 operators hit the ground in perfect tactical formation. Aurora's trained eyes cataloged them instantly. Full combat kit. Plate carriers. 416 Hong Kong dollars rifles with suppressors and optics. Sidearms on drop-leg holsters. Night vision mounts on their helmets. These weren't regular army. This was Tier 1, door-kicking, high-value target-capturing special operations. The lead operator was massive, easily 6 feet 3 inches, 250 pounds of muscle, beard that would make a lumberjack jealous. He moved with the controlled aggression of a man who kicked down doors for a living. Behind him, 3 more, one lean and quick with a medic patch on his shoulder, one built like a fire hydrant with a breaching shotgun, and one woman, rare in SLEF, with the kind of eyes that suggested she'd seen things that would break normal people. The lead operator scanned the parking lot with his rifle lowered but ready, saw Aurora standing by her Civic, and keyed his radio. Havoc 6, this is Breaker. Eyes on possible friendlies. Single female, 5'4", light hair, northeast corner of the lot. Requesting confirmation. Static, then Chen's voice through the radio, that's Reaper. Proceed. The operator, Breaker, lowered his rifle completely and jogged toward Aurora with his team flanking. They moved like water, like men who'd trained together so long they operated with one brain. Sergeant Jenkins. Breaker's voice was rough gravel, the kind of voice you earned from years of shouting over gunfire. Not sergeant anymore, Aurora said. Civilian now. What's the situation? Titans critical. Multiple GSWs to the torso and extremities. Took fire during a hostage extraction in Milwaukee 2 hours ago. Lost massive blood volume. Your level 1 trauma center stabilized him, but... Breaker's jaw clenched. He's crashing. Won't let their surgeons touch him. Keeps asking for Reaper. Command made the call to bring him to you. Aurora's stomach dropped. I'm not a surgeon. I was a combat medic, CST attached to Rangers. I'm not qualified for. He doesn't want qualified. He wants you. The female operator stepped forward. I'm Frost. I was on the Milwaukee extraction. Titan took 3 rounds keeping a family of 4 alive. He's a hero. And he's dying because he's too stubborn to let anyone but you keep him alive. The medic, his patch red Bishop, pulled out a tablet, showed Aurora the medical readout. It was bad. Really bad. Blood pressure 70/40. Heart rate 140. O2 saturation hovering in the low 80s. Multiple chest wounds, 1 abdomen, right leg completely destroyed. They've got him on 4 units of O-negative and he's still dropping, Bishop said quietly. The surgeons in Milwaukee said he's got maybe an hour. Less if he codes during transport. So bring him here. Mercy General has excellent trauma surgeons. No. Breaker's voice went flat. Not after what happened. Aurora blinked. What are you talking about? We know you just got terminated. Know why? No, some ego-tripping doctor decided his pride was more important than the truth. Breaker's expression suggested he had opinions about Sterling that probably violated several military regulations. Command's position is that we don't trust Mercy General's medical staff to put Titan's welfare above their politics. So what's the plan? You. Breaker gestured toward the hospital. We need access to an proper equipment. And we need it now. You get us in, you lead the surgery with Bishop assisting, we make sure nobody interferes. That's insane. I told you I'm not a surgeon. You kept 9 Rangers alive during the Kandahar ambush, Frost interrupted. Operated in the back of a shot-up Humvee while taking fire from 3 directions. Performed field amputations, thoracotomies, damage control surgery that would make most trauma surgeons puke. Don't tell us you're not qualified. That was different. That was battlefield medicine, not. Titan's dying. Bishop's quiet voice cut through Aurora's protests. And he's scared. That big, tough, mean bastard is scared. Because the last thing he said before they sedated him for transport was, "Get me to Reaper. She won't let me die." The words hit Aurora like a physical blow. She closed her eyes. Saw Titan the way she remembered him, grinning like a lunatic while laying down suppressing fire, cracking terrible jokes during mission briefs, carrying her pack when her knee was blown out because can't let our doc get left behind. Saw him teaching her how to perform a field tracheotomy on a training dummy, his huge hands surprisingly gentle as he guided hers through the procedure. "If I fuck this up, I'll never forgive myself," Aurora whispered. "If you don't try, none of us will forgive ourselves," Breaker replied. "What's it gonna be, Reaper? You in or out?" Aurora looked at the hospital. At the place that had just thrown her away. At Sterling's BMW parked in its reserved spot. At the Black Hawk idling behind her, its rotors still spinning, ready to go. Some choices weren't really choices at all. "I'm in. But we're going to need to move fast and hard. Security will try to stop us." "Security can try." Breaker's grin was feral. "Won't succeed. And Dr. Sterling will call the police." "Let him. By the time they show up, we'll either have Titan stable or..." Breaker didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Aurora nodded once. "Okay. Follow me. And gentlemen, try not to shoot anyone. I'd like to keep my nursing license." "No promises," Frost muttered. 4:42 a.m. The doors. The Mercy General ER had exactly 2 entrances, the automatic doors at the front for ambulances and walk-ins, and a secure staff entrance at the rear that required a badge. Aurora no longer had a badge. She had something better. "Breach her up," Breaker called. The fire hydrant operator, his patch red hammer, stepped forward with a tactical ram that looked like it could open a bank vault. "Wait," Aurora said. She walked to the front automatic doors, which slid open on their sensors like nothing was wrong. Like she wasn't about to lead a special operations team into a hospital to perform unauthorized surgery. The operators followed her inside. The ER night shift was quieter now. Hayes had been transferred to psych. The drunk had sobered up enough to be discharged. Only Mr. Donnelly remained in the ICU, stable and sleeping. Jessica was at the nurse's station, filling out paperwork. She looked up when the automatic doors opened. Her eyes went wide. 4 fully armed operators in tactical gear, rifles at low ready, moving through the ER with Aurora Jenkins walking point. "Oh my God," Jessica breathed. "We need O2, Aurora said calmly. "It's an emergency. Life or death. We'll be gone in 2 hours. "Aurora, what? Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Just get O2 prepped. Full trauma kit. Typo negative in the blood bank, as much as they can spare. And keep Dr. Sterling away from us. That's not a request." Jessica stared at her for 3 heartbeats. Then she grabbed the phone and started dialing. Sometimes, Aurora reflected, the best way to get cooperation was to act like you had authority. Even when you absolutely didn't. Brad emerged from Bay 3, stopped dead when he saw the operators. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Is that Army Rangers?" Aurora confirmed. "Critical patient inbound. We need." The automatic doors burst open again. 2 EMTs wheeled in a gurney at a dead run, a ventilator bag pumping oxygen into the patient's lungs. And there was Titan. Bigger than Aurora remembered, even broken and bleeding. IVs in both arms. Pressure bandages soaked through with blood. His face was gray, lips blue-tinged, skin clammy with shock. But his eyes, when they fluttered open and found Aurora, held recognition. "Reaper," he rasped through the oxygen mask. "Told them you'd come." Aurora grabbed the gurney rail, started pushing toward O2. "I'm here, you big stupid bastard. And you're not dying on my watch. Copy." "Copy." A ghost of his trademark grin. "Hua." "Hua," Aurora replied. They crashed through the OR doors at a run. 4:48 a.m. Sterling's very bad morning. Dr. Marcus Sterling was in his office, finishing the termination paperwork for Aurora Jenkins, when the alarms started going off. Not medical alarms. Security alarms. He pulled up the camera feeds on his computer and felt his reality tilt sideways. Armed soldiers in his ER. Not National Guard. Not cops. Actual military operators with rifles and tactical gear, moving through his hospital like they owned it. And leading them. "That's impossible," Sterling whispered. Because leading them, looking nothing like the weak, trembling nurse he'd fired an hour ago, was Aurora Jenkins. Back straight. Head high. Moving with the kind of command authority that made seasoned ER nurses jump to follow her orders. Sterling grabbed his phone, dialed security. "We have armed intruders in the ER. Send everyone." "Dr. Sterling." The security director's voice was carefully neutral. "We've been advised this is a military medical emergency. Federal jurisdiction. We're not to interfere." Advised by who? Someone who used words like national security and classified patient. "Look, Doc, I'm not getting in the middle of whatever this is. You want them gone, call the Pentagon." The line went dead. Sterling stared at his phone, then at the security footage showing Aurora and 4 operators pushing a gurney into O2. And something finally clicked into place. The military background she'd mentioned. The training she'd used to take down Hayes. The way she'd moved, the way she'd talked, the way she'd commanded a crisis situation with absolute authority. She hadn't been lying about Fort Benning. About the Rangers. About any of it. And Sterling had fired her. "Oh God," he whispered. "What have I done?" Bishop had Titan intubated and sedated within 90 seconds. Frost had established 2 more 4 lines and was hanging blood products. Hammer stood guard at the door, his rifle ready, his expression suggesting that anyone who tried to interrupt was going to have a very bad day. And Aurora stood at the surgical table, gloved and gowned, staring at the wreckage of her friend's body. 3 GSWs to the chest. 1 to the abdomen. Right femur shattered. Blood everywhere. "Talk to me, Bishop," Aurora said quietly. Vitals are shit. BP 65/30ths. Heart rate 155. He's in hemorrhagic shock. We stabilize the chest wounds first, stop the major bleeding, then worry about the leg. He'll lose the leg. Probably. But he'll be alive to bitch about it. Aurora took a breath. Let it out. Let 3 years of civilian life fall away like a shed skin. Sergeant Aurora Jenkins, call sign Reaper, picked up a scalpel. Let's get to work. Blood. So much blood. Aurora's hands moved through Titan's chest cavity with a kind of muscle memory that comes from doing something 100 times under the worst possible conditions. Battlefield surgery wasn't pretty. Wasn't elegant. It was controlled violence performed on a body to stop uncontrolled violence from killing it. Clamp, Aurora said. Bishop slapped the instrument into her palm without hesitation. They'd never worked together before, but combat medics spoke a universal language. Bullet fragments in the left lower lobe, Aurora narrated, partly for Bishop's benefit, partly because talking kept her focused. Track goes through the diaphragm, nicked the spleen. He's lucky, another inch medial and it would have hit the aorta. Lucky's not the word I'd use, Bishop muttered, his hands keeping the chest retractors in place. Aurora isolated the damaged section of lung, clamped off the bleeders. Her hands didn't shake. Didn't hesitate. This was what she'd been trained for. Not the sterile environment of a civilian but the back of a helicopter or the floor of a shot-up building where the only light came from a headlamp and the only tools were whatever you could carry. Second wound, Aurora moved to the next GSW. This one's cleaner. Through and through, missed major vessels. We can pack this and move on. Frost appeared at her shoulder with gauze and quick clot. You've done this before. 18 months in Kandahar. You see a lot of GSWs. Aurora packed the wound, watched the bleeding slow to manageable. How's his pressure? Climbing. 75/40. Still not great. Better than dead. Bishop, talk to me about the abdomen. Bishop had already opened Titan's belly. Liver laceration. Grade 3, maybe 4. Actively bleeding. This is the big one. Liver injuries were a nightmare. The organ was vascular, friable, difficult to repair. In a civilian trauma center with a full surgical team, it was challenging. In a borrowed or with a combat medic and a ranger medic, it was a Hail Mary. But Reaper didn't miss Hail Marys. Pack it, Aurora said. 4-quadrant packing technique. We're not trying to repair it, just stop the bleeding long enough to get him stable. Her hands moved. Pack. Check. Pack again. The liver was angry red, oozing blood from multiple tears. But slowly, with pressure and packing, the bleeding stopped. Pressure's up, Frost reported. 85/50. Heart rate dropping to 130. Good. How much blood have we run? 6 units. He's going to need more. He'll get it. What's our time? 53 minutes since we landed. Aurora checked the chest wounds one more time, verified the packing was holding. Then she looked at Titan's right leg and felt her stomach sink. The femur was shattered. Bone fragments visible through the muscle. The femoral artery was intact, miracle, but the damage was catastrophic. We can't save this, Bishop said quietly. I know. He'll need a surgical amputation. Proper or vascular surgeon. Which we don't have time for. Aurora stared at the ruined leg. If we evacuate him like this, he'll code during transport. The shock, the blood loss, he won't make it. So what do you want to do? Aurora had performed 3 field amputations in Afghanistan. 3 times she'd taken a saw to a living person's limb because saving the leg meant losing the life. She still had nightmares about the sound. Get me a tourniquet and a Geely saw, Aurora said. We're doing this now. A crowd had gathered. ER staff, security, even a few patients who'd heard the commotion. They stood outside or two, watching through the observation window as Aurora Jenkins, the weak, incompetent nurse they'd mocked for 3 weeks, performed damage control surgery that would make most trauma surgeons weep. Dr. Sterling stood at the back of the crowd, his face ashen. Jessica watched through the glass, her arms crossed. She's saving his life, the head nurse said quietly. Right now in real time, she's pulling that man back from death. She's not qualified, Sterling said, but his voice lacked conviction. She's more qualified than anyone in this building. This from Amy Rodriguez, who'd pulled up Aurora's military records on her phone. Listen to this. Sergeant Aurora M. Jenkins, Cultural Support Team, attached 75th Ranger Regiment. 2 deployments, 16 months combat operations. Silver Star for actions during the Kandahar compound siege, where she maintained combat casualty care for 9 wounded Rangers during a 6-hour firefight, performing multiple field surgeries under direct enemy fire. The crowd went silent. Amy continued reading. Bronze Star with Valor. Purple Heart for injuries sustained during enemy contact. Combat Medical Badge. Army Commendation Medal. Completed Army Special Operations Combat Medic Course, Combat Lifesaver Course, Tactical Combat Casualty Care. She looked up. She's not just qualified, Dr. Sterling. She's a certified badass. Why didn't she tell us? Brad whispered. Would you have believed her? Frost had appeared behind them, her rifle slung over her shoulder, her expression suggesting she'd really like an excuse to use it. Would you have listened to a 5 feet 4 inches woman with PTSD telling you she used to operate with Rangers? No one answered. Through the glass, they watched Aurora work. Watched her hands move with absolute precision. Watched her save a life while the surgeon who'd fired her stood helpless in the hallway. Titan was stable. Chest wounds packed, liver bleeding controlled, right leg amputated below the knee. His vitals were solid, BP 110/60, heart rate 88, O2 saturation 98%. He'd live. Aurora stripped off her bloody gloves and gown, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Bishop grabbed her shoulder, steadied her. You did good, Reaper. Damn good. I cut off his leg. You saved his life. There's a difference. Bishop smiled. He's going to wake up pissed as hell, but he's going to wake up. That's what matters. The door opened. Breaker stepped in, phone in hand. Reaper. You've got a call. I'm a little busy. It's General Mattison. JSOC Commander. He'd like a word. Aurora blinked. Joint Special Operations Command didn't call former combat medics for casual chats. She took the phone. Sergeant Jenkins speaking. At ease, Sergeant. The general's voice was gravelly, authoritative. I understand you just saved Staff Sergeant Morrison's life under difficult circumstances. I did what needed to be done, sir. Under protest from hospital administration, I'm told. Despite being terminated from your position. While facing potential legal action. A pause. That takes balls, Sergeant. With respect, sir, I didn't do it for balls. I did it because he's my friend. Which is exactly why I'm calling. We need combat medics like you. People who understand that sometimes the rulebook needs to be ignored when lives are on the line. Another pause. How would you feel about coming back to work? Not active duty, contractor position with JSOC. Training new CSTs, consulting on medical protocols, maybe some field work if you're interested. Aurora's breath caught. Sir, I left for a reason. PTSD, nightmares. Which you've clearly learned to manage. Jenkins, I've read your file. I know what you've been through. I also know what you're capable of. We're not asking you to become someone you're not. We're asking you to teach others to be who you already are. Through the window, Aurora could see Sterling standing in the hallway, his career imploding in real time. She could see Jessica and the ER staff looking at her with new eyes. She could see Titan, alive and breathing, because she'd been brave enough to step back into the life she'd tried to leave behind. I need to think about it, sir. Fair enough. You have my direct number now. Call me when you decide. General Mattison's voice softened. And Sergeant? Thank you. Titan's one of our best. We'd have lost him without you. The call ended. Aurora stood in the covered in Titan's blood, and tried to figure out who she was supposed to be now. The sun was rising over Chicago when the hospital board convened an emergency meeting. Aurora sat in the conference room, still in her surgical scrubs, flanked by Breaker and Frost. Across the table, Dr. Sterling looked like he'd aged 10 years in 6 hours. The board chairman, an elderly man with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, reviewed the incident reports in silence. Then he looked up. "Dr. Sterling, walk me through your decision to terminate Ms. Jenkins." Sterling cleared his throat. "She violated hospital protocol, used unauthorized restraint techniques, put patients at risk. She stopped a 280-pound veteran from hurting people," Breaker interrupted, "using approved crisis intervention team techniques that your staff aren't trained in. Techniques she learned serving this country." "That's not." "And then," Frost continued, "approximately 4 hours after you fired her, she performed damage control surgery that saved the life of a Tier 1 operator. Surgery that your trauma team refused to perform because they were, quote, not comfortable with the political implications." Sterling's jaw clenched. "That's not what happened." "Really?" The board chairman pulled up a recording on his tablet. "Because we have the conversation. Your trauma team leader explicitly stating that they wouldn't operate on a classified patient brought in by armed military personnel without proper authorization. Would you like to hear it?" Silence. The chairman continued. "Dr. Sterling, in the past 6 hours, this hospital has been exposed to significant liability. Not from Ms. Jenkins' actions, but from yours. You fired a highly qualified combat medic for doing her job. You refused treatment to a critically wounded soldier. And you've potentially violated federal law regarding medical care for military personnel on classified operations. I was protecting the hospital. You were protecting your ego." The chairman's voice went cold. "And in doing so, you've created a public relations nightmare. The story's already hit social media. Hospital fires hero nurse, refuses treatment to wounded veteran. We're trending on Twitter, Dr. Sterling. And not in a good way." Aurora watched Sterling's face go white. "Effective immediately," the chairman said, "you are suspended pending a full investigation. Ms. Jenkins, on behalf of Mercy General Hospital, I apologize for the way you were treated. We would very much like you to consider returning to your position." "With a raise," one of the board members added. "And a formal apology." Aurora looked at the board. At Sterling. At the offer being laid before her. Then she stood. "Thank you, but no. I'm done with Mercy General." The chairman blinked. "Ms. Jenkins. You let a doctor's ego override patient care. You created an environment where admitting military experience was seen as a liability instead of an asset. And you're only making this offer now because you're afraid of bad publicity." Aurora's voice stayed calm, professional. "I appreciate the apology. But I don't work for people who only value me when it's convenient." She turned and walked out, Breaker and Frost following. Behind her, she heard the chairman say, "Dr. Sterling, clean out your office." Aurora stood on the roof of Mercy General, watching the sun paint Chicago gold. Breaker had radioed that Titan was awake and asking for her. Bishop had already coordinated his transfer to Walter Reed for proper surgical follow-up. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. "Jenkins. It's Chen. Heard you turned down the hospital's offer." News travels fast. Especially when it involves one of our own telling a hospital administrator to fuck off. Metaphorically. Chen paused. "So, you thinking about Mattison's offer?" Aurora watched a Black Hawk circle in the distance. Probably the one that would evacuate Titan. Back to the military world. Back to the place where her skills meant something. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to go back. Part of me is terrified of what going back means." "You know what Titan told me?" Chen's voice was quiet. "After they pulled him out of that compound in Milwaukee, bleeding from 3 holes, the medics trying to stabilize him. You know what he said?" "What?" "He said, 'Get me to Reaper. She's the only one who can fix this. Not get me to a hospital. Not get me to a surgeon. You." Because he knew we all knew that when shit hits the fan, Reaper doesn't quit. Doesn't break. Just gets the job done. Aurora's throat tightened. "We need you, Reaper. Not despite the PTSD, not despite the nightmares, not despite the 3 years you spent trying to be normal. We need you because you came back from all that and you're still willing to fight. Still willing to save lives. That's what makes you special." "I'm not special. I'm just." A combat medic who saved 9 Rangers while taking fire for 6 hours. A woman who took down a 280-pound veteran having a PTSD break without hurting him. A person who performed field surgery to save her friend despite being fired and threatened with legal action. Chen's voice warmed. Yeah, Reaper. You're just ordinary. Keep telling yourself that. Aurora laughed despite herself. You're an asshole, Havoc. I learned from the best. So what's it gonna be? You coming back to the world, or you gonna go find another hospital that doesn't appreciate you? She looked out at Chicago. At the city where she tried to build a normal life. At the world that would never quite understand people like her. Then she looked at the Black Hawk. At the world where she belonged. Tell Mattison I'm in. But I'm not going back to active combat. Training only. And I get to set my own schedule. Done. Welcome back, Reaper. The call ended. Aurora stood on the roof and felt something shift in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying for 3 years, the pressure to be normal, to be weak, to hide who she really was, just lifted. She was Sergeant Aurora Jenkins. Call sign Reaper. Combat medic. Ranger qualified. Silver Star recipient. And she was done apologizing for it. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Special Operations Medical Training Course. Aurora stood in front of 24 students, a mix of Army, Navy, and Air Force medics training for special operations assignments. They watched her with the kind of nervous attention people give combat veterans with 3 rows of ribbons on their chest. Combat medicine, Aurora began, isn't about memorizing procedures. It's about making impossible decisions in impossible situations. It's about looking at a soldier with half his leg blown off and knowing you have 60 seconds to save his life with the equipment in your aid bag and the training in your head. She pulled up a slide showing a field amputation. This is Staff Sergeant David Morrison. Call sign Titan. 6 months ago, he took 3 bullets protecting a family during a hostage rescue. The leg was unsalvageable. And I had a choice, spend 30 minutes trying to repair irreparable damage while he bled out, or take the leg and save his life. The students leaned forward. I chose the leg. He woke up pissed as hell, called me every name in the book, threatened to haunt me if he ever died. Aurora smiled. Then he thanked me for being brave enough to make the hard call. The door at the back of the classroom opened. A figure on crutches entered, tall, bearded, moving with the awkward grace of someone still learning to walk with a prosthetic. Titan grinned at the class. She's lying, he called out. I never thanked her. I told her she owed me a beer for every inch of leg she took. And I wear a size 13 shoe, so that's a lot of beer. Laughter rippled through the students. Aurora rolled her eyes. Titan here has graciously agreed to be your trauma dummy for the next exercise. Who wants to practice a field amputation? Absolutely not, Titan said cheerfully, making his way to the front. But I will show you what proper post-op looks like. And I'll tell you about the medic who saved my life while I explain why you should all be terrified of small women with medical training. The class laughed again. Aurora stepped back, watching Titan charm the students with his story. Watching the next generation of combat medics learn from his survival. Her phone buzzed. Text from Chin, heard you're killing it at the schoolhouse. Proud of you, Reaper. Aurora smiled and typed back, just teaching them not to be weak. You know how it is. Ha. You were never weak. You were just hiding. Not anymore. Good. World needs more Reapers and fewer cowards. Keep fighting the good fight. Aurora put her phone away and turned back to her class. Back to the work of training the next generation. Back to the life she tried to leave behind and found she couldn't. Because some people aren't meant for normal. Some people are meant to run toward the gunfire while everyone else runs away. And Aurora Jenkins, Sergeant, Reaper, combat medic hero, had finally accepted which kind of person she was. The weak nurse was dead. The warrior had come home. If you enjoyed this story of courage, sacrifice, and hidden heroism, please like this video and subscribe to Sage Stories for more powerful narratives every week. Have you ever met someone who was far more than they appeared? Someone whose quiet strength changed everything? Share your stories in the comments below. And remember, the person next to you might be hiding a hero's heart. Treat everyone with respect. You never know who they really are. Thank you for watching.